Hi, I'm Dawn Schultz, and I'm here today to show you why, if you make bread and it doesn't turn out, why that might be. I've been making bread since I was 10 years old. My mother's best friend helped teach me how to make bread, and I've had plenty of failures in bread, I guess, so to speak, but I've actually become a pretty experienced baker. But it wasn't always that way. I have dealt with sunken loaves. I have dealt with bricks. I have dealt with loaves that exploded out the side and didn't hold their shape. Gooey centers that were underdone or I thought were underdone. I've had dry, crumbly textures. I've had dough that didn't rise at all, even before I tried to bake it. So when talking to people, they often say they can't make bread, that it never turns out, or that it's too hard and they don't have a talent for it. I want to explain to you today that it doesn't always have to be a talent, and there are plenty of reasons why your bread might not turn out that have absolutely nothing to do with your skill or ability. Bread has three variables that I want to point out today that are pretty much out of your control, but you can find ways to compensate for them. The first being the protein content of the flour, the second being weather factors, and the third being the weights and measures in the recipes that you use. The protein content is really important because protein content varies from about 5.5% all the way up to 12% in all-purpose flour. Everything that I use today, I have got from the kingarthurflour.com, their website. That is the flour that I use most of the time. And so if you want to look this information up, that's where you'll find that information. With such a wide range in the industry of flours, from all the way from, generic store brands all the way up to kind of what they consider a specialty brand, everything in between with regional and national brands of flour, anywhere between 8.5 to 12% protein content for all-purpose flour, you can have a lot of variation there. I mean, that's a pretty large range. So you need to take that into context when you're making a recipe, even if you're using the same brand you've always used, or mom's always used, or grandma's always used. So you need to consider that. And then you can compensate in different ways, which I will show you in just a few minutes. The other thing is weather. If it is hot or it is dry, you may need more liquid content, or you're going to end up with a dry, crumbly crumb to your bread product at the end. If it is too wet or humid, if it's raining outside, if it's hot, if it's cold, then your flour is going to need less liquid because it won't hydrate as quickly in those conditions, because the flour already is overhydrated by just the moisture in the air. So those are some things that you need to know how to compensate for. Pay attention to what's going outside, what fronts are moving in. The third is your weights and measures. When you are weighing and measuring your ingredients, specifically your liquid ingredients such as water, and your main dry ingredient, your flour. Because a standard 1 cup of all-purpose flour is 4.25 ounces. The way that you weigh or measure that, or don't weigh or measure that, can make a difference. It can also make a difference in whoever wrote the recipe that you're using. If the person that wrote the recipe is the scoop and level method, which means they take their cup, they scoop it in, and then they level it off, that's going to weigh a lot different than if you fluff your flour and scoop it in. Krista, will you come look at my scale here? My daughter's helping me today with this. If you go the pounds and ounces, I scooped and leveled it off. That is a 1 cup measure, but it is 4.7 or 4.75 ounces. So that's an ounce more than I actually need. So that will make a big difference in my end product, especially if I have a recipe that uses 6 cups of flour and I add a ½ ounce each scoop. That's a lot of extra flour. So we're not going to do that today. What we're going to do is what's considered the correct method. Now, in the baking industry, they actually weigh everything. So we're going to kind of do a combination today so you can actually see. So I'll put the plate on there. Make sure you hit tare so that it goes back to 0. We're going to start out here with our King Arthur flour all-purpose. I fluffed the flour up before we got started. And then you just scoop it in there. You don't shake the cup. Try not to bang the cup because if you hit it, you can cause some unnecessary settling of the contents. And you just pile it up there until it's over the edge, and then you just gently level it off, and that's really all you want to do. We're going to put it on here so you can see that is right at 4.3, which is in between 4.2 and you know, close to 4.25. So we'll use 4.3 today. Put that in there. Get all that off. Start back with our plate again. Make sure we tare. And then we're going to take our next brand, which is a regional, somewhat national brand. It's pretty, you know, prevalent in the South. And we'll scoop that in there. And we will a little bit more. Make sure I get this side. And level that off a little bit. And I will tell you, baking can be very messy. As you will see, I got flour everywhere. See, even as careful as I was in that, I got 4.7. So we're going to scoop a little bit off till we get back to that 4.3 so we can make sure all things are equal here today. Well, come on. There we go. Okay, so that's 4.3 of our second brand. We're going to go back and tare again. And this is our generic store brand. Okay, here we go. We're going to level that off. You don't pack, you just kind of scrape across. Let's see how I did here. And 4.2, so we just need a tiny bit more. Well, actually it went down to 4. It's kind of rocking back and forth, isn't it? Let's see, just there we go. 4.3, right where we want to be. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. Okay, we'll get that out of my way. This out of my way. Okay, now we're going to move this over to fluid ounces. And we are going to put this up there and tare that so we get back to 0. We're going to use 1 cup of water here. Let me turn this around so Krista can get the measurements here. And we went a little bit over because we want 8 ounces. So we're going to pull some out. Okay, that's cup bowl 1 there for 1 cup. Make sure we get back to our 0. And there's 8 ounces there for the cup bowl 2. The second cup, go back to 0. And just a tiny bit over there. Okay. Well, that's funny. Okay, there we go. All right, 8 ounces there. Now I'm going to stir each bowl and show you how the different protein contents react and why the King Arthur flour is a better choice, especially if you're an inexperienced baker and you may not be able to understand how to compensate because you just haven't dealt with bread enough. Okay. All right. So you see how this is mixed up? It's pretty. Okay, so you see how this is pretty liquidy. You know, it's pretty runny there, kind of like runny pancake batter. Let's try our second bowl. Going to mix it up. So you have to make sure if the weather's an issue that you adjust your flour. That's why most recipes will say 5.5 to 6 cups of flour. So you can adjust for the weather. Start with the smaller amount, of course, and then add a tablespoon at a time until you get to the right consistency. And usually, not always, that is described in the recipe. Okay, you see how this is also pretty runny, and maybe even a little more so than this. That might actually have a little bit more body to it there. That's pretty runny. And then we have the King Arthur flour over here. And I'll bring it a little closer. Now, it is consistently, because the national standard for flour is it's a standard deviation of 2.0 on the protein content. But King Arthur flour standardizes their protein content. They say their all-purpose flour has 11.7% protein, and then they standardize it within 0.2 deviation. So when you have that, you can see here that has a thicker body to it. It's still kind of runny because it's a cup of flour and a cup of water, but you can see much better. This is very, very liquidy and very thin, and this is closer to the King Arthur, but still very liquidy and very thin. If you could feel these, you could feel the consistency when you pick them up and how much stronger this is. And so the next time you bake, realize, even if you're buying the same brand you've always bought and you're making the same recipe that you've always made and it just doesn't turn out this time, that it may have not been you. Weigh instead of measure for more precision, for better results. Use your judgment depending on the weather and the protein content of your flour to make sure that it looks, whatever your batter or dough is, it looks and feels the way that it did last time. And then adjust either the liquid or the flour accordingly. Okay? Then you can make better bread. Thank you.